that's right. We're right here at Sharp Facets Gallery in my studio back here, and today I have a very special guest, one who wants to be the solicitor for 2000, I guess we should say 2013. You'd like to get elected in 2012, I guess, so to be solicitor in 2013. That be correct?
That's correct, Ann.
All right, and I have David Stumbo here. He, of course, was born and raised here in Greenwood, and then he went out in the world and saw a little bit of our South Carolina down there, Lexington and Columbia. And we're going to be talking to you about your career, how you got started. You have 11 sisters and brothers, is that right?
Actually 9. I'm
9?
One of 10, so I'm 9 other ones.
Okay, well, the number's growing.
Well, I hope not, unless Mom and Dad have not told me something.
Okay.
I think my youngest sibling is Summer, who is 13. So hopefully.
Are you the oldest?
I'm the second oldest.
Second oldest.
Jonathan is my oldest brother. He is 38 and lives over in Athens, Georgia now. But he and I had a sign business here in Greenwood here in the late 90s and early part of the last decade. And he's not only my big brother, he's one of probably my best friend. Jonathan's talked to him a lot on the phone, about every day.
Absolutely. We also have your wife Laura here today with us.
That's actually Vanessa.
Vanessa. Gosh, I'm getting everything wrong here.
That's
I'm sorry,
okay.
Vanessa.
That's
sorry.
Okay. Yeah, she was probably starting to think she wasn't told something too.
All right, Vanessa's here with us. She's going to be sitting in just enjoying the process here today. And of course, you are an attorney now with McCravey.
That's correct. I do work with the McCravey, Newland, and Sturkey law firm here in Greenwood, right down the street from where we are today.
And you actually grew up here. You went to, graduated from Cambridge when Cambridge had a high school.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's a lot of people may not know that. When they see Cambridge, they don't realize that Cambridge at one point actually had a high school.
It did. It did from 1969, I think, was when they started up until just a few years ago. They had to. I was unfortunate that they closed the high school.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have moved back here from Lexington. When did you move back?
Well, we moved back in the end of December, early January, and the reason is I was leading one of the leading attorneys for Alan Wilson's state grand jury in Columbia, and so actually we lived in the Chapin area. I worked in Lexington for 4 years, but we lived actually out between Irmo and Chapin, not too far off I-26, and we, Vanessa and myself and our 4 children, have moved back to our home.
So, and you told me this is the farm that Vanessa grew up on?
That's correct. The farm Vanessa grew up on is in Mountville, little blink and you'll miss it farming town out between here and Clinton.
Particularly since they've changed the bypass.
That's correct.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Now you drive right past it instead of through it. But Vanessa grew up on a farm in Mountville. And currently we're renting a house out in the Waterloo area, but we really are excited about the opportunity to raise our children on the farm out on 39 where Vanessa grew up.
Oh, that's cool. Wasn't a strawberry farm, was it? No? Okay.
Very close to that.
They're very close to the strawberry farm. Okay. They have good strawberries over there.
That was the Alexander family.
Okay.
They did a good job with the strawberry farm.
Absolutely. So when you were growing up, what did you want to be?
A couple of things I had in mind growing up. The first thought I had is I wanted to be a coach. Growing up, all I cared about just about was playing sports. I played basketball, baseball, football at Cambridge. We actually played on the first football team we ever had at Cambridge Academy under Coach Gary Roper, who's now retired, but he's a fine man. Eight-man football, correct. And had a great time with playing sports. And my thought, I loved history too. I'm a history buff. So I really thought I may end up being a history teacher in high school and coaching basketball.
That would have been a good combination,
so,
yeah.
That's right. That was one dream of mine. But I really felt strongly as I got towards the end of my time in undergrad. I went to Toccoa Falls College up in northeast Georgia, and really felt like the Lord was leading me to possibly be an attorney. And I really I've always loved law enforcement issues, working with law enforcement, public service, and really going to law school after being in the sign business here in Greenwood. My first thought was I'd really like to be a prosecutor. That's what doors opened for me as I got into law school and in my time there in Columbia at USC Law School.
Just interesting that God would push you in the direction of an attorney. You know, they don't have this good a
That's right.
reputation.
Well, you know, it's funny you say that, Ann. A lot of times I would tell people, instead of telling them I was a lawyer, that conjures up a bunch of negative stuff.
I've got a book of jokes over there.
That's right, exactly. But if I told them, hey, listen, I'm a prosecutor. We actually, prosecute violent people. Particularly early in my career, I prosecuted child sex predators. And it doesn't get much more rewarding and honorable than someone who wants to hurt a child, putting them in prison. So if I introduce myself as a prosecutor who prosecutes child predators, that's a little bit better than saying, hey, I'm a lawyer. So, but I'm not ashamed to be an attorney at all. I think there's attorneys out there, even in private practice, that really serve their communities and serve people. So it is an honorable profession. I think sometimes attorneys get a bad rap, but sometimes it's deserved as well. So
absolutely. Well, we are here with David Stumbo. We are going to be here the whole hour. If you've got a question or a comment, don't hesitate to give us a call, 229-7984. That's 229-7984. Give us a call. We're going to be talking all about the solicitor's office. Now, real quick, you want to be the solicitor for Greenwood, Lawrence, and Abbeville, correct?
Correct. And Newberry.
Newberry, that's right, Newberry. That's a pretty diverse group of counties put together here, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and as I've campaigned over the last several months, that has really highlighted itself. I found that Newberry really has more of a Columbia feel to it. There's a lot of folks that live in Newberry and Prosperity, a Little Mountain, that actually work and go to church and have friends and do social things in Columbia. Mm-hmm. Whereas Greenwood, Lawrence, and Abbeville certainly have more of an upstate flavor and associate themselves more as being upstate counties. So it is there is a lot of diversity in the four counties in more ways than I just mentioned. But I found that me growing up here and some of the folks in Greenwood and Lawrence, a lot of the people that I've met, some of the finest people I know. And there again, I worked and lived in the Columbia area for a long time, but there are fine people in the Lakelands and the counties that I hope to be the solicitor for, and I'm proud to be from Greenwood. And I've always told everyone that have listened to me I'm a Greenwood boy raised in Greenwood, so I'm proud to be from this area.
Absolutely. Now, of course, your dad is a CPA.
He is.
That's right. And did you have to work when you were growing up?
I did. In fact, when you're one of 10 kids, you have to work. You have to pull your load around the house. In fact, I many times as a teenage boy, and not many teenage boys had to watch babies and change diapers and that kind of stuff, but I did. So I had to do that kind of work. But I worked a variety of jobs around Greenwood and high school. My dad, I can tell you this. Even if he had the financial means, maybe for where I would not have to work, every summer in high school I worked, and had to. Any money that was my spending money came out of my paychecks that I made in the summertime. He didn't supply that, so but he did provide for us well. My dad is a fine man. I am so proud to be his son. He served the folks of this community for many years now as a CPA, and I think you can talk to anyone who's been one of his clients, and his client group grows every year because he's such a trusted person around tax time to make sure the job gets done right. He's as honorable and honest and fine a man as there is in this town. Absolutely.
So you're back here in Greenwood. You're running for solicitor. There's going to be a lot of differences, though, between Lexington County and here in Greenwood in this area.
Well, maybe a few, but I'll tell you this. Lexington is traditionally, there's parts of Lexington that are very urban. West Columbia is right across the river from downtown Columbia. And so I had a number of cases when I worked in Lexington County that were more urban areas that we prosecuted in. But the majority of Lexington County, if you look at a map, is very rural and much like Greenwood and Lawrence and Abbeville.
How many attorneys would work work in the solicitor's office?
I'm not sure how many they have. You talking about in Lexington?
Well, yeah, in Lexington.
In Lexington, I'm not sure the number they have now.
When you worked for Donnie?
When I worked for Donnie, for the whole circuit, we had, I think, 18 lawyers.
18, okay.
18, but in Lexington it was less than that because there were several attorneys that worked exclusively out in Edgefield, Saluda, and McCormick.
Okay.
In which I handled some cases out there too, but for the most part, we had attorneys that just handled those 3 counties, and the other attorneys in the office handled Lexington.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we are here with David Stumbo. If you have a question, give us a call, 229-7984. That's 229-7984. When we come back, we're going to be talking about, all the different issues that have to do with the solicitor's office, as well as why we're going to go forth with this. So don't you go away. We'll be right back.
Are you a pirate or a pack rat? Do you have a vacation of a lifetime sitting in the attic? Or a college tuition hung on a wall? Or is a fabulous retirement hidden in your jewelry box? Bring those items to Sharp Facets Gallery. We can establish value and buy from you or sell for you. And so ends another chapter at Sharp Facets Gallery, 72 Bypass, and on the web, sharpfacets.com.
All right, we're back here with David Stumbo. That's right, he's running for solicitor and on the Republican ticket, so therefore there will be a primary on June 12th. So our objective is for you to know the candidates. That's right, I have a little thing going on that, signs. Are you going to vote for somebody on the sign, or are you going to vote for somebody that you know? And part of our objective is to make sure that you know who you're voting for. So let's see, we just had a question come in. Bill Baker said, word is that you are backed with money out of Columbia. Why would they be interested in a Greenwood job for you?
Well, I say this, if you look at my financial disclosures, and I would invite anybody to go look at them online, the majority of people supporting me financially right now are in the Lakelands. I do have a number of people in Columbia support me financially too. But I'll tell you this, the people that support me out of Columbia have absolutely zero vested interest in this race other than they have worked with me before. There's a number of folks that have given me out of Columbia that have worked with me before, think I'm an honorable person, that I try to do the right thing as a lawyer, and think I'd make a great solicitor up here. And it's for no other reason than that. It's not because they can get something out of me or get me to do something if I get elected for them. I can't do that. And people in Columbia know that. So the folks that are given in my campaign that are out of Columbia generally are folks that there again I've worked with, and they know my body of work. They know what I've done. They know what I've done in my career, and they know what I'm capable of doing if I'm elected solicitor here. And so I don't apologize for that one bit. But there again, I have a lot of supporters up in this area too. And there again, I would invite anybody to go look online if they're bored and don't have anything else to do at night and want to look at the financial disclosures. It's all publicly disclosed. Actually, I had to file one this week for the pre-election report. And they'll see many names on there from Greenwood, Cross Hill, Lawrence, Abbeville, Little Mountain. I have supporters that have supported my campaign from all 4 counties in this circuit.
Okay.
So and I'm proud to have the support not only within the circuit but with people that have worked with me and know my work and respect what I do. So.
Well, somebody actually told me yesterday, David, that I haven't checked your record, but somebody said that Donnie Myers is a big supporter of yours down there.
Well, Donnie's one of those guys that if you'll notice that you can look at my disclosures. Donnie hasn't given me a dime of money either. He's the solicitor down there, and he has to work the solicitor piece through the prosecution commission and otherwise. So yes, I'm proud to say though that Donnie Myers, because he's one of the finest trial lawyers I've ever seen. If you ever go watch that man try a case, it's a sight to behold. And he has. He's well known all over the country. He's put more murderers on death row than any living prosecutor here. So he is someone who I'm proud to have learned under as an assistant solicitor, and he's someone who I'm proud to say is a friend of mine. But there again, I don't think there's any kind of overt support from Solicitor Myers, other than he's a friend of mine, and he's seen me work in the courtroom and knows what I'm capable of, and he wants to see me succeed. So I'm there again. Don't apologize for Solicitor Myers' support one bit.
No, well, I'm not saying that you should. I just that had been a question that came up. Actually, Ben yesterday told us that you had gotten substantial support from Johnny Myers.
Well, I'd like to know what he means by substantial support, because I don't believe. And there again, you can look at my disclosures. I don't have any. I don't think Donnie's contributed to me. So I wouldn't mind if he did. That'd be great. But he'd be one of many. And there again, someone who doesn't have any vested interest up here.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. Let's talk a little bit more about what you feel is happening and why you felt it necessary to get into the solicitor's race. What is the biggest thing that you see?
Well, the biggest thing is making sure that law enforcement's confident and has trust in how their cases are being handled. And I've worked with law enforcement all over the state. I've worked with law enforcement even here in this circuit, but with SLED and with federal agents as well. And it's amazing to see the connection that law enforcement has with their prosecutors if the prosecutors are doing a good job, and the relationship that you have between the two. And I get the sense here in the 8th Circuit that there's a real separation between the prosecutors and the law enforcement community. And to me, that was something that really motivated me here to run for solicitor, is seeing that. As I started looking at the numbers here, and I noticed that we've lost more jury trials in the 8th Circuit than we've won over the past couple reporting periods, and those numbers are on the Supreme Court website, www.sccourts.org, if anyone wants to go verify that. But we have a lower conviction rate at jury trial in this circuit than any other circuit in the state. And as someone who had a very high conviction rate, not only at the solicitor's office in Lexington, but statewide through the state grand jury and the criminal prosecution division, the attorney general's office, that really concerned me, because this is my hometown. And I started seeing numbers like the FBI numbers that came out when we moved back to town indicated we had a higher crime rate in Greenwood than any other municipality in the upstate. That was very concerning to me. So a lot of these things.
But are those figures actually accurate?
Well, I'd invite people to go look at the FBI numbers. There's a website called www.neighborhoodscout.com, which is the same website that a lot of businesses go to when they decide where to relocate somewhere. And people, if they want to retire in a certain area, the first thing a lot of people look at when they want to go to an area, is what's the crime rate. And so, whether that Greenwood is the most dangerous place around or not, I don't know. That's probably a subjective determination. But the facts are, in the latest FBI report, that we have the #1 crime rate in the upstate of South Carolina. So perception becomes reality. If that's what people are looking at when they do Google searches on the Greenwood area, that's concerning. Now, I don't think that's.
Should we put that on our sheriff and our city police?
Absolutely not, Ann. I think Sheriff. I think Sheriff Davis and Chief Brooks are doing a fine job. In fact, one of the reasons why the numbers are so high, I would surmise, is because they're making a lot of arrests, and they're arresting the same people time and time again. Okay, and that's I think that's one of the problems. And if you talk to law enforcement out there in the community, I'd encourage anyone who's listening today, go find someone in law enforcement in the Greenwood community tomorrow and ask them about the solicitor's race. Go, if they're your neighbor or friend, or if you know them socially, go ask them, and they'll tell you what they think about the way their cases are being handled. And if you have,
so Tony Davis has told you that he's not pleased with the way the cases are being handled?
Well, Sheriff Davis hasn't told me that, but I've talked to a lot of people who work in his department. And there again, I'm not going to throw names out here, Ann, because the bottom line is they can go tell that for themselves.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
But I can tell you this: there is displeasure across law enforcement in the 8th Circuit with the way their cases are being handled. And there again, I would encourage anyone who's listening to this broadcast, go ask them. They'll tell you that. And that's a problem if you have a morale problem in law enforcement with the way things are being handled in court. And so that's concerning to me. And the fact that we have the highest crime rate, I think, is indicative of something. And if it's not accurate, I'd like to know why that's not an accurate figure. If the FBI are taking that off straight off their stat sheet.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to talk some more about that. We are going to hear South Carolina news, which has already started, so don't you go away. We'll be right back here with David Stumbo, running for solicitor. If you got a question, looks like it's going to be a fun one here today, 229-7984. That's 229-7984. All right. We're back here at Sharp Facets Gallery. We have David Stumbo with us. We have questions coming in. Telephone man wanted me to make sure that you understand we only have one person on the phones here. So be patient. If you don't get through, call back. Give it a few minutes and call back. We also only have till 5 o'clock here today. Okay, I got a call from, let's see, Jan Rogers. Asked Tony Davis at the stump meeting. Sheriff Davis has said he had no problem with peace, but would like to get different judges. How would you change this? Is there a possibility of getting different judges coming to our circuit here?
Well, listen, I think that the judges we have in the 8th Circuit, a lot of people know him. Frank Addy was a probate court judge here for many years, and now he's our the primary resident judge for Greenwood County on the Circuit Court bench, which handles criminal cases and general sessions. I know Frank Addy well, and I don't see any reason why we need to run off Judge Addy. I think he's doing a fine job. So, no,
but we do have more than just Frank Addy as a judge here.
He's one, and also Bubba Griffin is the judge. Judge Griffin is from Newberry, and so he's another one of the 8th Circuit resident judges. And there's visiting judges that come in from time to time. I know Judge Billy Keesley from Edgefield, who's in the 11th Circuit where I used to practice. I had many cases in front of Judge Keesley. He's been up in the circuit even recently. I think he had a term of court in Lawrence within the past year. I know he was over at the courthouse. So, that's a question that's really out of my ability to control. And the legislature elects judges, and I have absolutely, even if I'm elected solicitor, I will have absolutely zero say-so or input into who our judges are.
Now, just out of curiosity, since this is just a question off the cuff I just thought about, how in this, shall we say, the defense attorney, the solicitor, and the judge, how important is the judge in determining what happens here?
Well, he's the one that ultimately passes the sentence, okay, on a criminal defendant. He can take a guilty plea or not take a guilty plea. He presides over a trial. If the solicitor calls the case for trial, the judge is the one that's kind of the referee. He makes the decision on objections, on what evidence comes in, on communicating with the jury on what the law is. He instructs the jury on the law, so he's very important in the trial scenario. In the scenario of a guilty plea in criminal court, typically the judge hears a few minutes from both sides. The solicitor will call a case for a guilty plea. He'll qualify the plea. The defendant will plead guilty, and he'll waive his rights to a jury trial and right to confront the witnesses and all the rights afforded to him by the Constitution. The judge goes through all of that with him. Then he'll hear a short recitation of the facts from each lawyer on both sides, and then he'll make a decision on sentencing. Sometimes the solicitor can recommend a sentence. Sometimes he can negotiate a sentence with the defense attorney, in which, if it's a negotiated sentence, the judge either takes it or he decides not to and says, well, I'm not taking this sentence. I don't think that this is a fair negotiation. Most of the time the judge will take a negotiated sentence. And so there's not, it can be handled a number of different ways by the judge. But typically in a guilty plea scenario, they hear that very short recitation of the facts, and then they hear from the attorneys on what they feel like the seriousness of the case is.
Sure. Which
will have a lot to do with the decision they make on sentencing, and that's a very important part of that. A judge can't decide a case and a sentence on a case in a vacuum. A judge has to hear from both sides, and typically both sides will not only give a recitation of the facts, they'll give it in such a way to say, well, Judge, this law enforcement tells us, for example, in a drug case, this is one of the most egregious drug dealers we have in Greenwood. Or they could present it as, depending on this is a first-time person, or they kind of leave out, don't really emphasize their criminal record. So how you present it as the prosecutor has a lot to do with how the judge treats a sentence on a straight-up guilty plea, which is what that's called, where there's no negotiations, no recommendations.
So the solicitor's part in this, or the prosecuting attorneys, maybe we should say, because the solicitor does not actually prosecute every case here. He has his attorneys that are the prosecutors.
That's correct, and they make a decision on how the case is typically going to proceed. The solicitor, the prosecutors in South Carolina control the call of the cases completely. Constitutionally, under our state constitution, there's prosecutorial discretion, and prosecutors have the decision of when cases are called. Now, the only exception to that is under the Constitution, there's something called a speedy trial motion. Mm-hmm. And a criminal defendant can file a motion for a speedy trial, and a judge can set it for a specific date to be resolved. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the exceptions to that. But other than that, the solicitor can controls what happens, the disposition. If a solicitor wants to dismiss a case outright, he can do that. He can completely wipe the slate clean and say, we're not going forward. If he wants to call it for trial, jury trial, and say, no deals, we're going to trial on it, he can do that. If he wants to reduce the charges to a lesser charge, the solicitor can do that. So
as a solicitor, what is your position as far as how you would treat cases?
Well, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all to any case. Every case is different, and that's why we have the judicial branch of government. I don't think the legislature can say, we're going to handle every case in this category.
No, but you were telling me off-air what your philosophy is as far as a prosecutor, and I presume that that would be what you would carry on and want your prosecutors that worked for you if you were elected to the solicitor's office.
Well, my primary philosophy as a prosecutor, Ann, is the people that we need to take the hardest line on, that being the most violent criminals, those that would hurt children. Child predator cases, to me, are very high priority. Those are ones that I'm not going to make a plea deal on child predator case unless it is absolutely there's some good reason for that. In other words, we can't find a witness, or there's something that's really gone wrong with the case that we need to reevaluate it. But if I have a child who's been prepped for court, who has gone through the forensic process, who has a compelling disclosure of, say, sexual abuse, and the family has gone through that process and is ready to go to court, and that's a case I'm going to take to trial, or it's going to be a straight up plea the day of court.
Sure, and you were telling me though that you believe in not once you put a deal on the table, it doesn't come back around as a prosecutor.
Right. Once that any offer, plea offer, typically plea offers will come on the front end of a case and say, okay, this is how we can resolve it without having to go forward and prepare for trial and get witnesses ready, the expense of it. And that's done very often, Ann, in court, because we can't try every case. There's no question about that.
That goes very, very good to a question that just came in. Bill Simmons says, why not just negotiate most all nonviolent cases and empty the county jail?
Well, there again, I don't think we need to paint all nonviolent cases with a broad brush, because you may have what's classified as a nonviolent offender who has broken into 50 houses over the course of 2 years and been caught and let go and caught and given a deal on before. Mm-hmm. So that may be a nonviolent offender, and that is such a repeat offender that he needs to go to prison to be held accountable.
Well, what about repeat offenders? I mean, we're not supposed to have this revolving door, are we?
Absolutely not.
I mean, aren't we supposed to have 3 or 4 strikes and you're out or something?
Well, that's correct. But the 3 strikes and you're out, well, that's a good point, and I'm glad you brought that up. That only applies to violent cases. The only ones that are strikes are violent cases, and there's certain categories of drug trafficking cases that are strikes. Trafficking of any given crack, cocaine, heroin, a laundry list of drugs that classify as trafficking is a strike. So if you get so many of those, you can get life without parole. I had a life without parole case several years ago in Lexington where an individual had an assault and battery with intent to kill on his record, which is essentially what we call now an attempted murder, and then he molested an 8-year-old girl. So he had a prior strike, and this was under the 2 strikes and you're out, because those are most serious offenses, and we noticed him for life. He decided he wanted a trial, and I basically said I would take the life without parole off if he pled guilty to it, and he would plead straight up. He did not. We convicted him of sexually assaulting that little precious little girl, and he went to prison for life. And so that's a good example of that. But we can't have the revolving door. I'm a firm believer that sooner or later, after someone's been through a number of times, we need to just cut that off and say, listen, you're not getting the good deal this time. We gave it to you last time. Now you're back on the streets and you've done it again, and we're prosecuting you vigorously this time, and you're going to plead straight up, and we're going to ask for prison time.
Now, we have a lot of cases. The attorneys here, I understand, handle somewhere between 600 and 700 cases a year. That's a lot of cases.
It is, and I'll say this: there's a lot of circuits in the state that have maybe better caseloads than that, but there's some that have just as bad. I know there's certain areas of the state. I know for a fact down in Darlington, the Fourth Circuit, which is Darlington, Chesterfield, down in Marlborough County, that area of the state is very poorly funded, and their prosecutors there are swimming in cases. Probably even more so than up here. I don't have their hard numbers as compared to the 8th Circuit. So there are other areas of the state where it's difficult. I can tell you when I was in Lexington, across the board our attorneys may not have had as high of caseloads as we've had in the 8th Circuit, but I personally resolved close to 1,800 warrants in between 3.5 and 4 years in Lexington. So if you average,
have those multiple warrants for the same person?
That's correct.
Sure.
And that's the same thing here. I've heard the solicitor mention many times here that we've had over 6,900 cases recently. Well, that's technically it's true in the sense that there's 6,900 warrants, but you may have one criminal defendant that's facing 10 charges, and so that's not necessarily that we have 6,900 criminal defendants.
But that's across the state.
That's correct.
I mean, everybody.
That's how
right.
That's how numbers are recorded in the case management system. So if you go to the Supreme Court website and you look at the reports, what that's referring to in those numbers are actually warrants, not defendants.
Right.
And so those are the numbers that I've heard Solicitor Keith cite many times, and those are the numbers I just cited to you.
Sure.
So resolution of cases, though, we can't use the excuse that we don't have enough money and we have too many cases. We have to be aggressive on the worst people. I mean, despite the money issues, we can't let dangerous people get out and be walking the streets to be a threat to my kids and other children and families and people here in Greenwood County.
Out in the Midwest, they did a firing squad. What do you think about that, David?
A firing squad? Well,
yeah, they had a firing squad. They actually gave this guy an opportunity, and he was shot. That's one of the stories on the I Love Ann show, verified. Yes,
well,
sir.
I do know. I think if I remember correctly, Utah. Was it in Utah?
Well, I'm saying the Midwest, but somewhere in that.
I know Utah still has the firing squad, so it must have been in Utah. I think that's the only state that has a firing squad. In fact, most states now have lethal injection.
Right.
The ones that still have the death penalty. And,
I think a firing squad is much easier, isn't it?
Oh, gosh.
You just put 5 or 6 guys out
I don't
there.
know. I don't know that I've ever thought about the answer to that question. I think after the end of it, if someone who's been a brutal murderer ends up dead is dead. Whether it's firing squad or lethal injection. I think lethal injection is the preferred method now nationwide. Which is
we haven't really had any death. We have some people on death row, but have we actually executed any of them in recent history?
Yes, I know in the past year there was, and I can't cite the names just off the top of my head right now, Ann, but they had several executions in the last year in the Department of Corrections, and I actually worked with Don Zelenka is one of the smartest attorneys I know, one of the finest people I know. He is the chief appellate attorney in the Attorney General's office for capital litigation, which is death penalty cases, and he is someone who takes his job seriously. He certainly takes no pleasure in someone being executed, and I don't think any prosecutors do. It's a sad day when that happens, but
sure.
But there again, I am a believer in the death penalty when it's appropriate, and I think that we need to exercise that in cases where we've had someone who has brutally murdered someone, particularly who's murdered a child, and someone who's killed a police officer. I think if an individual has murdered a police officer in the line of duty, to me, that by default should be a death penalty case, and that's one of the aggravating circumstances under the death penalty law for seeking the death penalty is killing a law enforcement officer. And if I'm elected your solicitor, I will protect law enforcement to the nth degree. And if we have someone who kills a law enforcement officer while they're doing their job and take them away from their wives and their children forever, we're not going to have any mercy and any patience with that criminal defendant.
But then there comes another question, though, is the overcrowding in the jails. How do we deal with long-term sentences that keep the jails overburdened? I know here in Greenwood we had a situation where our jails were in the federal government came in and said you got to do something about it.
Right. Well, if you're we need to distinguish a couple things here. You're talking about the county jail, where people are sitting awaiting trial, or the Department of Corrections.
But I'm actually talking about the Department of Corrections as far as people that have been sentenced in long term and the cost to the taxpayers.
I can tell you this: that the Department of Corrections has been woefully underfunded for a long time. And John Osment was the director of the Department of Corrections for a number of years under the Sanford administration. He was a good man who was trying to do a lot of good things in the jails. He had a lot of reforms that he passed, and he asked for better funding for the prison system. And he constantly ran up against a brick wall in the legislature with funding the Department of Corrections. That's a major problem. And I can tell you this, as a solicitor, I won't be able to control the money that goes to corrections, but I will advocate to our local delegation in the legislature, our senators and our House members here, that we fund Department of Corrections better, because ultimately on the local level it's our job to make sure that dangerous people are taken off the streets. And I can't control when we send them down the road, we expect our state government to back us with that.
Sure.
And it's
but if the money's not there, or they can't find the money to do it.
Well, I can tell you this: we have a $21 billion budget in South Carolina, and the Department of Corrections is a minuscule part of that. If you look at our state budget, and I think we could find some more money in that $21 billion to make sure that our citizens out on the streets are kept safe. I don't think that's a good excuse, Sam. We have to keep
I'm not
our
making an
citizens
excuse.
safe.
I'm just making.
No,
a reason.
I've heard that said before. That we don't have enough money. Well, if we need to build a couple more prisons to put people that are dangerous in to protect my kids and our children and our communities, and we need to do it.
Now I had another question come in. Mark Rizd, I think might be right. Mark, anyways. Would you clean house to change the solicitor's office with this, as you say, culture of non-performance?
Well, I don't think I've ever used the word culture of non-performance, but that's an interesting term. I absolutely would not clean house. And I've had several people come and ask me that. Well, you're just going to go up there and fire everybody if you're elected. That's preposterous. What I would like to do, if I am fortunate enough to be elected, Ann, is sit down individually with each and every attorney and staff member of the solicitor's office and have a conversation with them about what direction they want to go with their career. And if we have people in that office that are ready to do a lot of jury trial work, because I can tell you this, in my first year in office, if I'm elected, we're going to size the docket up, and we're going to start trying a lot of cases and making examples and setting a tone on the worst criminal defendants. Not everybody, and like you said, we don't have enough court time to try every person.
Sure. But
we need to try the right people. And so we're going to have I'd love to have a conversation with every person in that office, particularly the attorneys who are going to be making these decisions on what cases go to trial and what cases are pled, and ask them what their vision is and what their philosophy of prosecution is. And if it aligns with the direction we want to take the solicitor's office, then I'm happy to have them come along with me. Come along, and let's do this thing. Let's keep the people of Greenwood safe. That's my main goal. Personnel issues are secondary to keeping this community safe, and that's the solicitor's job. Do you feel we're not safe? Well, I think there's areas of Greenwood that aren't, and you can go a lot of areas in Greenwood that aren't safe. And I would certainly say some of the child sex abuse cases where defendants haven't received jail time. That's not necessarily keeping people safe. I mean, if you have someone who's a pedophile who's molested a child who is not given prison time, then that's going to put someone at risk, because we know based on research that pedophiles typically reoffend. I mean, and I used to work sexually violent predator cases at the Attorney General's office as well, where we saw a lot of pedophiles come through that program. And it is a dangerous thing to put a pedophile back out on the streets. And so I have seen examples of that happening in the circuit, and yes, if that's the case, that's putting some child at risk.
Okay. All right. We had another question come in. Beth Miller, a teacher, as a public school teacher, are you all homeschooling?
We are currently right now, but my kids have been in public schools. They actually were in public schools in the Chapin area when we lived in Columbia, but we are currently homeschooling.
Okay, it says as a teacher, as a public school teacher, would you homeschool? As to being a public figure, you should show faith in the public schools.
Well, I can tell you this: every parent has a decision to make when they educate their children.
Sure.
And they have to do what they feel like is best for their family, for each individual child. And I think that's an unfair assumption from Ms. Miller. I would address it specifically to say that that anyone who would choose to homeschool their children doesn't have faith in the public school system. I think that is an extraordinarily prejudicial statement towards people who choose to homeschool their children or to send their children to a Christian school or to a private school. I can tell you this from my experience, Ms. Miller. I went to public schools through the 7th grade. I went to Cambridge Academy from 8th to 12th, so I went to a private school. My family has homeschooled some of my younger siblings, so my parents and my siblings have been homeschooled. And my children have been in both public schools and in homeschools. Mm-hmm. And so my answer to that is every child is different. Every child needs to be, really spend time with them as a parent and choose what the best educational route is for your child. I think this is a little bit off topic from the solicitor's race, but I will say this, that I have absolute, complete faith in a lot of our public school teachers. In fact, my sister-in-law, Beth Crisp, is a elementary school teacher over in Hickory Tavern. At Hickory Tavern Elementary School is one of the finest people I know, and I have absolute support and faith in our public schools. And that has nothing to do with our personal decision as a family for this particular year to homeschool our kids.
Just questions that come in.
That's right.
All right. Well, we are talking with David Stumbo here. We've been talking about one question I have. As far as experience in being able to run an office, David, how do you feel that you would stack up? Because you'd be stepping into how many attorneys? 11, 12 attorneys?
I believe there's 12 attorneys.
Right.
Yeah.
So how would you feel about being in charge and able to handle it and get it up and running quickly?
Well, when I started as in the Attorney General's office in my latest stint there, the State Grand Jury and Prosecution Divisions, we had, I think, 20 attorneys when I started, and we had some attrition during the time I was there, and we didn't replace any of them. So it whittled down by the time I left to where we only had, I believe, 13 or 14 lawyers, which is still more than is in the solicitor's office for the 8 circuits.
Were you in charge? Is that what you're telling us?
Well, we had teams there, but what I'll tell you is this: we rotated. The team leaders rotated within the prosecution and state grand jury divisions, and in the months that I was leading the division, we had and anyone from any team would come and consult with me. Anybody who was even on another team would consult with me. I directly supervised 6 attorneys. Mm-hmm. But indirectly, like I said, close to 20. And so I had many attorneys from other teams that would come and say, David, here's what I have on this case. How do we need to proceed on it? And so I have...
Hold on one second. Yeah. This is WCRS right here in Greenwood. We're going to run over here a minute or two. Go ahead, David. I just had to make that announcement.
Okay, no, that's okay. That's okay. But anyway, I have managed attorneys, and in my latest stint at the Attorney General's office, Alan Wilson, who's our Attorney General, a great friend of mine and one of the finest people I know, trusted me enough to bring me over to manage lawyers in his office. And I think if he trusted me enough in his status to bring me over and manage prosecutors in his office, which were going all over the state to prosecute cases, then I do believe I'm qualified and believe the 8th Circuit can trust me enough to elect me solicitor to manage our attorneys here in this office in Greenwood and for the 4 counties.
Okay, all right. Well, listen, we have been talking with David Stumbo here, as I always do, David. I'm going to give you 2 minutes, 2 whole minutes, to tell us what you would like us to know real quick here at the end.
Okay, well, 2 minutes, gosh, that's not a lot.
We've talked about a lot, David.
Right.
I've whittled it down for
Okay.
you.
Well, listen, I care about this community, Ann. I can tell you that. You know, I've moved back here because I care about this community, and I think we need to do a better job in the courtroom. That's the bottom line as to why Vanessa and I decided to move our 4 children back to where we were raised and to try to make a difference here in our hometowns. And that's why I'm running for solicitor. I have a proven track record of getting convictions. I convicted over 90% of the jury trials I had in the close to 4 years I was in Lexington. As an assistant solicitor, I tried more cases than anybody in that office. And if I'm elected your solicitor here in the 8th Circuit, I vow to personally be in that courtroom, not only trying cases, but managing our attorneys on a week-in and week-out basis. I will be in the courtrooms all across the circuit and the counties. I'll be accessible, and I'm excited for the opportunity. And I think we can make a difference, and we can keep Greenwood safer by making sure that violent criminals, that child predators, that drug dealers are taken off these streets, sent down the road to Department of Corrections, and we won't have to deal with them anymore for many years. So I'm excited for that opportunity. I've done that my entire career as an attorney. I've been a small business owner in Greenwood. I worked for Grace Signs. My brother and I had a sign company before I went to law school. So I believe in this community. I believe we have potential here to be one of the greatest municipalities and areas, and not only in Greenwood, but the rest of the circuit that we have in all the upstate. We have businesses that I think would love to come relocate here, and we can keep our crime rate lower, which we have the highest crime rate in the upstate right now in Greenwood. We need to work on that so we can attract businesses right here to Greenwood and really grow this community.
Absolutely. Now, David Stumbo, I suppose you'd like to give out your telephone number and website, wouldn't you?
That's correct. My cell phone number, which is on all my campaign material, is 803-422-2781. You can also call me at my office phone, which is 864-388-9100 is my office phone. And also my campaign website is www.stumbo, S-T-U-M-B-O, for solicitor.com. And I'd invite everybody to go to the website and check out everything we have on there. And friend me on Facebook, too. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and all that good stuff, so I'd love to get invites and friend requests on Facebook.
Well, David Stumbo, thank you so much for coming on today. Good luck in the race.
Okay, thank you for having me, and I appreciate it.
Absolutely. This is WCRS right here in Greenwood. I understand Curtis Loftus is on his way to be here on the show. He's coming to Greenwood. That's our state's attorney. I mean, our state treasurer. And don't you go away, because I'll be back, and then we'll have a little happy hour. What do you say, folks? I'll be back. Don't you go away.